We're so glad you guys joined us this morning. So this is the tract for mental health. We're going to be covering addiction recovery today. We titled our presentation, Proclaiming Liberty to the Captives. My name is Sydney Norzow. I am a physical therapist by trade, and I serve on the Northern New England Conference Health Ministries. And this is Jackie Howard. She's a life coach. She works with Dr. Zach Mazzoni, and she's working on her psychology degree. And we're really happy that you're here today. And before we get going too far, I would like to pray. So if you guys wouldn't mind bowing your heads with me. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we are so grateful for the bright blue sky that we see today and the sunshine and the birds that are singing. Lord, you have blessed us so much this weekend by holding off the rain and bringing us all here to enjoy this time with you. And Lord, as we begin our presentation this morning, I just pray that you would send your Spirit to be with us, that you would open our minds, Lord, and our hearts to receive the information that you would have us to take away, that you would quicken our minds, Lord, to realize the needs of our church and our community and how we might be able to fulfill it, and how we might be able to interact better with our brothers and sisters that struggle with things, that struggle with addictions of all different types. And so, Lord, we thank you so much for answering these prayers, and we ask that you would be with us and bless us right now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. So, this is a little bit of what we're going to be covering this morning. We're going to be going over addiction and what it is. We're going to talk about working with addictions, different types of addiction programs and seminars that you could run for your local church, and how to actually plan and implement those seminars or programs. Generally speaking, Jackie has a lot more experience in running addiction programs and working with addiction than I do, just as her profession is in mental health and life coaching. I'm up here really because I'm kind of passionate about the topic. And I think I have some valuable things to share as far as facilitating events is concerned. I haven't personally had very much experience with addiction, and to be completely honest, my family and my close friends, they've been pretty unscathed by the epidemics of addictions and things like that we've had in our society. I haven't personally struggled with addiction, although my husband has had his struggles. But what really made me passionate about this topic is when I realized that I might not struggle with addictions like that society usually thinks of, but I'm still an addict. And my addiction of choice is technology, specifically social media. And that's been something that I've really struggled with breaking myself of recently, especially. And it's technology is starting to become much more recognized as an addiction, an addictive substance. But we usually discuss it in terms of young people and youth, right? We talk about it with children. But in reality, there are many adults that are addicted to their phones, and they're completely ignorant of the fact, right? And so what I would like to do is actually take it a step further and suggest to all of you that we are all addicted to something, right? Whether we want to admit it or not. There's some people that are addicted to substances like opiates or heroin, meth, tobacco, alcohol. There are people that are addicted to behaviors, sex, porn, gambling, social media, video games, eating. And maybe you are thinking, well, I'm not addicted to any of those things. But the Bible says that you are addicted to self. We all are, right? And if that wasn't true, it wouldn't be so hard to submit ourselves to the will of God, right? That wouldn't be such a struggle if we were not addicted to ourselves. And so what we are going to be doing today is we're going to be really talking about how do we labor for those that we label as addicts. And it's important that we realize that we really aren't any better than them. We are all addicts too. Our addictions, they just might be more socially acceptable, right? And so what I would like to do really quickly is I would like to look at Romans 7. if you guys have your Bibles, you can turn to Romans 7. I'll have the verses up on the board too here. So we're all familiar with Romans 7, right? Are we? Maybe? Most of us? Okay. So typically when we think about Romans 7, we're thinking about it in a spiritual context, right? When we read it, this time I want you to read it in the context of addiction. Okay, so we're going to start in Romans 7, verse 14. It's actually going to be easier to keep up with changing the slides if I read it off the board. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. If you are sold under something, what are you? A slave to it. And are addicts a slave to their addictions? Absolutely. For what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. But what I hate, that I do. If then I do what I will not to do, I agree with the law that it is good. But now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good, I do not find. For the good that I will to do, I do not do, but the evil I will not to do, that I practice. Now if I do what I will not to do, it is no longer I who do it, but sin dwells in me. I find then a law that evil is present with me, the one who wills to do good. For I delight in the law of God according to the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? I thank God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then with the mind I myself serve the law of God, but with the flesh the law of sin. So what is Paul really describing here? What do you guys think? How would you describe this?
No wrong answers.
No wrong answers.
I want to hear from you.
Is there a struggle going on here?
Yeah. It's selfish desires.
Yeah, it's an inward struggle, right? It's an inner struggle. It's an inner conflict of coming to a realization that what we cherish, what we are addicted to, is sin, right? It is evil. But are we able to do it on our own? No, he says, "Oh, wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of sin, of death," right? And who's going to deliver us? God. Jesus, through Jesus Christ, right? We all go through this process on our spiritual journey, right? When we're kind of coming into that new birth experience of we have this intellectual understanding of what is truth, but we haven't got it to play out in our lives yet, right? And what happens when we're in that process, if we try to just pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and do it all ourselves, do everything that God has told us that we need to do? Does it work? No. People that are stuck in the addiction cycle, they go through the exact same experience. And they often get to a point where they understand on some level that what they are doing is wrong and it is bad for them, but they are completely powerless to stop it. They might try over and over again to kick their own habit, but they don't succeed. And you might say, well, how is it that they can know how horrible this is for them, how much damage this is doing to them, and not stop? You know, how does a heroin addict not know that this is killing him, right? It's for the same reason that we know what sin is, but we are unable to stop sinning on our own. It's the same reason. We are no better than the addict, friends. And if anything, they are actually in a better position than we are, because it's more obvious to them, right, where the problem lies. And we are typically much more ignorant of our condition. So ultimately, we really have to accept, we need to come to the place where we accept that we are all addicted to sin. The Bible says all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And our addictions might look a little bit different, just as all of our sins look a little bit different. But ultimately, the root cause of all addictions is the same. Whether the addiction is to a substance or to behavior or to self, it's all the same. And so what I want to look at next is I want to go over quickly a little bit of an overview of the addiction cycle. So the addiction cycle always starts with a missing need. At the root of every addiction, there is a need that that person has that is not met. What are some things that we need to survive? Food, water. What else did I hear? Shelter. Yes. Socialization. What about air? We're going to survive without air. Not for very long, right? Now, what happens if we don't have one of those things? What happens if we don't have water? Dehydration, right? And if you're really dehydrated, does that feel very good? No. You suffer, right? Dehydration, maybe you haven't had a drink in 2 hours. You're not, completely suffering yet, but you go like a day without water, you're going to start suffering a little bit, right? What happens if you don't have air? You suffocate. Is suffocation suffering? Yeah. What about if you don't have food? What happens? You starve. If you're starving, are you suffering? Absolutely. Now, when we supply our missing need, what happens? We get pleasure and relief of our suffering, right? So you're dehydrated, you're thirsty, you feel some suffering because you're dehydrated and thirsty. Now, if you get water, that gives you pleasure and relief, right? Now, what happens if you are dehydrated and thirsty and you don't have any water, and so instead you choose to drink a soda? Is that going to relieve your suffering? Sure. It's going to curb your thirst for the time, right? Right? But is it going to fulfill the need that you had for water? No. And if anything, the sugar in the soda is going to make it worse, right? But for a time, you had a relief of your suffering caused by the dehydration, right? And that relief of suffering is going to result in, or the removal of that suffering is going to result in pleasure or relief, right? But the problem is, you still fail to satisfy your needs. You still have a need for water. But now you realize, I'm still thirsty. I drank a soda that was horrible for me, and now I'm more thirsty than I was before. Are you going to feel a little guilty? Especially if you know it's bad for you, right? And so now you're back in this cycle of my need is still not met. I am still suffering. That soda helped me briefly. I might as well just drink a little bit of that again to get a little relief. And then I feel guilty again because I know I shouldn't have drank the soda. And around and around and around you go, right? And so this is really how, from more of a spiritual kind of perspective, how the addiction cycle begins. And it's really oversimplified, and Jackie is going to touch more on the physiology of all of it. But I want to get back to that root cause of addiction. We said that it's a missing need, right? And we said that we have some needs for survival. We have water, we have air, we have food, we have shelter. But there's another thing that we all need to survive. Can anybody guess what it might be? God. Yes, we're getting closer. Yes. I mean, ultimately that's it. But what was it? Love. Exactly. We all need love. And if we do not have love, are we going to die? We will. We will ultimately die, right? And it's not just that we need love. We do need to be loved, but we also need to be loving in return, right? So there's been a theme throughout this weekend, right, of this idea of being channels, right, where we receive something from God that we can then pass to other people, right? And love works the same way. We receive our love from God, and we are able then to give love to others. If we take from God and we never give, something's going to be off there still. And there's a lot of different facets of love. So different ways that we feel loved is acceptance. If we aren't accepted, what do we feel? Outcast, rejected. Belonging, we need to feel like we belong. If we don't feel like we belong, what's the opposite? Abandoned, right? What about honesty? If we don't feel like we are receiving or giving honesty, there's betrayal there, right? Protection. If we don't feel protected, we probably are going to feel abused. Appreciation. Nobody likes to be unappreciated. What about understanding? We all like to be understood. And we all like it when people take an interest in us, because otherwise we feel ignored, right? And that doesn't feel so good. We all ultimately need a love that is full, constant, eternal, unselfish, and personal, right? And who is the only source of that kind of love? God. Can any human fulfill that kind of love for us? I don't know any humans that are eternal. And I don't know that any that are unselfish completely. And I don't...
It's going to be that cycle.
Yes, exactly. And I certainly don't know any humans that are able to love me fully, constantly. Just Jesus. Yeah, he's the God-man. Yes, he's the eternal one. So, can we ultimately be the source of anything that we need to survive? Are we the source of our air? Are we the source of our water? Are we the source of our food? We're not the source of love either, right? So God is the source of all the things that we need. They all come from outside of us. And if we could produce it ourselves, then we wouldn't need it, right? And I'm going to suggest to you that God is that source of all these things. And so if we need love to survive, we say we cannot create it. We were all designed to be channels, right? Taking love from God and giving it to others. And that is what is going to bring us true pleasure and joy in our lives. So, Veronica, you mentioned this already. You knew I was going with this. So what happens if we don't go to God to get the love that we need? We what?
You go to man or self.
Yeah, we go to man, or we go to self, right? Men are all women in here, except Kyle. Oh, Luca, you're in the corner sleeping. Caught that on camera. So we said that there is no person that can fulfill the love that we need that is full, constant, eternal, right? Unselfish and personal. And this is really why we have problems with codependence. This is why we have problems with broken homes and broken marriages. The lack of this love is the root cause of all addictions. And without God, it's impossible to be full of love and overcome an addiction, right? So if we try to help people get victory over their addictions outside of God, it's only going to be behavioral modification. But there is not a true victory in that, because their temptation and everything else is still there and still just as strong, right? So this love is always available to us from God. He is the fountain that never runs dry, but we must go to him and we must get filled up there. No other person can fulfill that. Does this make sense to everyone? Yeah. It's oversimplified. But I want to have Jackie come up, and she's going to kind of go through this whole cycle, but from a physiological perspective of how does this look physiologically in the body, and have her come and do that next.
So I know that Sydney says I'm going to go, into teaching you the physiology of addiction, and I'm just going to hit on we're going to talk about dopamine for a minute and how that works in our body and what it is. And before I kind of go into that, I want to give you a visual about what it looks like in our body. So addiction, when we think of it neurologically, when we think of it physiologically, we could be here for hours talking about how that works. So I'm going to hit on just one idea of how dopamine is affecting our body and how that's affecting addiction. And if you want to know more, you can always ask me a little bit later. But for now, that's what I'll go into here. Thank you, husband. I appreciate you. Okay. Very good. So let's call this how addiction works. Now let's draw this chart out. I always like to keep this written near me because sometimes I get nervous still when I'm drawing this chart. So bear with me as I draw this for you. So over on this corner.
Jack, you gotta keep in mind.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll try to turn this way. Is that good, Kyle?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have dopamine and so we're going to look at what happens to dopamine over time, right? So right in this middle, we're going to call this baseline. And so in our bodies, we all have a baseline of dopamine. This is a hormone, a neurotransmitter. It has to do with our reward system. And so it's a good thing that we have dopamine. We want to have good levels. And so in us, we all have a baseline, which is good. Now, when we eat something that we like, when we complete a task, any of that, what happens is dopamine gives us motivation. It basically is signaling the reward center in our brain to say, whatever just happened, I really liked that, right? And so what happens though, let's just use food as an example for this one. The reason why we like starchy, salty, sugary food is because we're getting that dopamine reward in us, and that cycle begins. So, but let's say we like food so much to the extent that it really is an addiction, that we either can't stop eating those chocolate chip cookies, or maybe it's the ice cream, maybe it's the chips. I don't know what your thing is. We all have something that we're more inclined to having that's hard to stop having, right? And so what happens is, here we are at baseline, and now we partake in whatever that food is, or whatever the addiction, the behavior is that we struggle with, and what happens is, well, we get lots of dopamine, and it goes right on up, right? Now, have any of you heard of Sir Isaac Newton in this room? Well, I'm not saying I agree with everything that he said, but he once said that for the things that go up, they must what? They must come down, right? And so what happens is we get to this kind of peak dopamine here, where we just feel like on top of the world. We almost, you can think of it sometimes like if you have alcohol, that's maybe where the buzz happens, where you think that you're feeling really good. Yeah. But unfortunately, what happens is it's a long way down, and then we crash, right? And we crash, I should say, a little bit below baseline, right? So what that means is now we're going to need more dopamine to even get back to baseline, right? We started here, but now we're just a little bit below. So we have this much more dopamine that we're going to crave next time because we want to get that same thrill, right? And so let's just call this the crash zone, where we have a negative deficit of dopamine, okay? Does that make sense? And so I'm going to call also, let me put this down, it's starting to distract me. On this peak here, because we said there's good dopamine and there's dopamine earned in ways that aren't productive, I'm actually, even though this is the peak, I'm going to call this cheap dopamine, right? And what that means is I didn't really, sorry, I know my penmanship is very good. I never claimed to be an artist in this room. So this cheap dopamine, we get it because we didn't work for it. Nothing was earned in that sense, right? When we get natural dopamine in our bodies, it's because we're earning it. And so when we're just eating the thing or partaking in the addiction, it shoots up, we go to the peak, we get this rush of cheap dopamine, and then because it's cheap, that's why we crashed, right? Now check this out. Now that we're in the crash zone and we say, oh, I need more food, or I need another cigarette, or I need another shot of heroin, or whatever the drug is, right? We go and get more dopamine, but this time we need more for baseline, and we go just a little bit higher than last time, right? Because we need more to satisfy that craving. And so naturally, what do you think happens?
Crash again.
And we're gonna crash again. And this time, we're gonna go even lower. Okay, so we started at baseline, and this isn't, this is a dramatized drawing, but the concept is there. So now we're here, and we're in a really negative deficit now. So what do you think happens, or what do you think it means for somebody who now needs to get back to here? That's a long way up, right? I don't know if any of you in this room have struggled with addiction. I certainly have in certain ways, maybe not drugs or alcohol, but I know people in this room have struggled with that, right? And I'm sure that they could tell you that they just needed that next cigarette, or they just needed that next hit, or whatever the thing was, right? And so they have to go all the way up here and up just a little bit more. You might be noticing that to the extent that you climb in what you need is the extent to which you fall, right? There's only so much dopamine our bodies can handle, but that lower zone, we can keep getting lower, right? Which is a scary thing. And so I show you this chart for, addiction purposes, because sometimes it can be easy to say like, well, doesn't that person know what they're doing to them is really bad? Yeah, chances are, they might not know, like Sydney was saying, but chances are they probably know they're entering some destructive habits because they can just feel it in their body, right? And so it's a little bit unfair for us to say, well, why can't they just, bounce back and stop smoking or stop eating the thing? Well, they're in this big negative deficit, and just to get back to baseline, they already need so much, never mind the more that they need. So does that make sense to you about how generally dopamine works in our body when we're participating in addiction?
Yeah.
Now let me show you what God does. Because we said dopamine is good in our body and we need it. It's a happy hormone. I'll talk about it just briefly in a minute. So actually, let me ask you, so how do we get good dopamine in our body? What are some things? Shout it out. Go ahead.
Completing a task.
Completing a task, yep, that's one way. How else? Exercise, that's a big one. Any other ways you think that God makes that in our bodies? Being in nature. One of the biggest one is being in relationship, right? Not a maybe relationship, like romantically speaking, but spending time with friends, spending time with family, that's going to give you some of the greatest dopamine. And you know what the second thing is that gives us the greatest dopamine? Well, in a good way, in how God, yes. Eating in a good way. That does create dopamine. It's not the strongest, though. It's actually service to others. And so in relationship and service to others, and certainly eating healthy food is going to give us that, because it's going to feel like we completed a good task, right? Or like exercise does. So how it works in our bodies is, okay, so we start at baseline, and now the way that our bodies need dopamine is actually starting to look like this. See if I can do this right here. Okay, now what's different about this line here?
It's gradual.
It's gradual, right? So if it's gradual, and if you can imagine the rest of it being completed, I probably did this a little bit too big. Maybe I'll go like here. Just erase that. What does it mean if it's gradual compared to when it's spiking?
It's not shocking the body.
It's not shocking the body because there's no crash. What actually happens is when we go down, we're going back to baseline. We're not crashing, but it's just naturally going lower. And it dips just below baseline, right? And so if it's doing a dip, that's not a crash zone. That's not a big deficit. It's just enough momentum to get back up when we participate in healthy behaviors again. And so because of that, God helps it to regulate in our bodies. And so if that's not happening, then we see the addiction cycle that it's called Brittany, I don't know why, that Sydney was bringing out. That when we eat the thing, we feel really good, then we start feeling shameful right here because we just crashed and we said, why did I do that? Now we're feeling even worse because we participated in it again, and the cycle just continues. We get all these disturbances within us that we're compelled to participate in the addiction again to make ourselves feel better, and it's just this nasty cycle of shame that none of us enjoy, right? And so that, in a nutshell, is kind of the dopamine reward center in our brains of why addiction is just hard to break, right? Sydney brought up something really important that, you can modify behavior, but you can't bring transformation. Can you do things for a little while that will try to change your behavior? Yeah. But ultimately, if you're doing it in your own strength, it's just going to crash, just like we see in this dopamine chart, that transformation cannot be sustained by us, right? And feel free at any time. If you want to take pictures of a slide, or if you need me to keep it on and you want to get it on your phone, that's fine. I can draw this better for you later if you want to take a picture. I don't think anyone wants to take a picture of that one. All right. So we said our happy little dopamine here. It's a feel-good hormone. It's a neurotransmitter. It's made in your brain. It's known as one of the feel-good hormones. So we have serotonin, we have dopamine. Dopamine is the reward center. Serotonin is more of the happy, elated feelings that we get, and they work hand in hand. So I guess I kind of described this earlier, so we'll just move on from there. We seek more of the feeling. When it's a good feeling, we seek more of it, right? So let's start talking about addiction a little bit. Let's understand it a little bit more. So there are 4 different things that kind of go into addiction. We'll call it the 4 C's just to make it easy. We have compulsion, which is an overwhelming desire. Let's call it an overwhelming urge to want something. We have cravings. We often identify this because our thoughts, they're on repeat throughout the day. Or we feel like maybe we'll use the word obsess, or we'll obsess about thinking about something. Consequences. We continue to do things even when we know it's against our moral system and values. It gets placed above God and other primary priorities like family, right? And then control is the inability to stop. Now, it's a pretty common thing when we think about the inability to stop. We may have heard, or maybe we've said before, I could stop anytime, right? Or I'll stop tomorrow, or whatever. And it doesn't have to be about alcohol. It doesn't have to be about caffeine. It doesn't have to be about heroin. It could be social media, like Sid was bringing out. And so even though sometimes we think we can stop, we are lying to ourselves and saying, oh, well, I can stop anytime. Really, we're just kind of making an excuse for it. And so with compulsion, this, keep in mind, is an irresistible urge. So it's an uncontrollable desire to perform a specific action. Drug cravings mimic physical needs like hunger or thirst. And to a person who struggles with addiction, drugs can become as vital as food and water. Cravings can be so intense that it causes insomnia, where you can't sleep or you can't get to sleep. It can cause a big lack of appetite, where people aren't even eating, sometimes for days, right? Depending on the severity of the addiction. People who struggle with addiction tend to become anxious, agitated, unable to think of anything else until those cravings are satisfied, right? Which makes sense with our dopamine chart about why they're wanting it and wanting it and wanting it. That's all they can think of, because they need to meet that baseline and higher. When we talk about consequences, people might feel hungover or foggy or unable to function well at work, but it doesn't then deter them from stopping the behavior, right? So if somebody is binge drinking at night, and then they wake up and they feel awful and they go to work in the morning, and then they go home again, that awful feeling wasn't enough to say, oh, maybe I'll just stop. What it really actually is saying in their bodies and what is happening in their minds is they're saying, I need it again to feel better. So sometimes you would think like, oh, it's the opposite of, well, they felt so bad, they want to stop. And sure, there are people who they end up feeling that way and then they're able to quit with God's help. But most of the time, they're just propelled back into the cycle of addiction. Sorry, I'm just seeing if we could skip some stuff to save some time here. Let me read this to you. So, symptoms of addiction all look different on everyone, but the common ones are usually different degrees of, what do you think? What are some different symptoms of addiction that you can see and notice? We're not going on till I hear some thoughts from you.
Kind of your ability to be able to maintain focus with conversation with somebody.
Yeah, so maybe focus is going in and out. What do you think the mood is like of somebody who's really craving something? Irritable is the big one. It's one of the most common, right? So different degrees and variations of irritability, of anger, right? We often see people who are deep in addiction that they're isolating themselves, whether that's our kids who are never wanting to talk with family members, right? We see shame, we see depression, we see these big things that are consuming people, but these are symptoms of the problem, right? It's likely that they're either struggling with addiction or maybe some other issue in their lives, but they're, negative fruits of, they're symptoms of a condition, which addiction is a condition, right? let's go on. I think we understand that. So let's talk about, so when you work with people, I think sometimes it can be really intimidating to be like, what's my job, even if I'm not like, a substance abuse counselor, or what's my job? How far can I work with people? Sometimes not having that expectation or not knowing really what your scope of practice is can be scary when we're working with the community, right? And so lucky for you, what you're not doing, let's start there, is you're not providing clinical treatment. You're not managing medications, coming up with clinical treatment plans. You're not necessarily doing drug screenings, risk assessments. This really isn't your area, right? Unless this is like your job and that's what you're doing. What we're doing when we work with the community, when we work with our lay members, is ultimately we're showing people where freedom comes from, right? We're showing people that love need that Sydney was talking about, where we get that. So we introduce people to God. And by introducing them to God, then they start to see, oh, I can get my needs fulfilled here, right? You might be teaching boundaries. You might be helping people identify what addiction is. A lot of people are either in denial that they have an addiction, or they simply just don't recognize it as such, right? And so when you're working with people, you're going to want to know, can you identify addiction, right? Because if you can't identify, it's going to be hard to work with people who have it because you might not see it, right? And all these things can be learned if you have trouble with that. Don't worry. We might be walking with them through their pain. We might be giving different tools and strategies to help cope. And we may be helping them with the 8 natural health laws, right? So I think it was Veronica who said, exercise is a great dopamine reward. Well, when it comes to addiction, especially in getting out of addiction, introducing exercises and routines and systems helps to detox the body. It helps to give them good dopamine. And so that we can be using the 8 natural health laws to really help people in their recovery, right? So we're bringing in what we call that adjunct therapy, that helpful aid to a person who is struggling. We can do that with our community. We can do that with the people who are in our church. Now, if you still feel like you say, that's great, but I feel like I need a lot more skills to be able to help somebody. I just want to remind you that if you are passionate and you want to be committed to helping people, God is going to equip you 100%, right? You don't need to be a counselor or the best counselor to work with people. Jesus worked with people, and last I checked, he didn't have a doctorate, although he is the great physician, right? And so if Jesus lives in you, then you get to be that for people, right? And so God will enable you, and we also get to cooperate with God. And if we're cooperating with him, that means that we can learn tools and skills to help people, right? So on one hand, God enables us, and he gives us tools that we can use. I'll go into two examples right now. So Healing the Broken Brain by Eldon Chalmers. I think he's an Adventist. I can't quite remember. It's a very good book. You'll see I have it tabbed up. And with this, let me read really quick. It says, you'll learn to condition your brain for optimal performance through simple to implement diet and exercise changes. You will also get crucial information on how your brain forms habits that can destroy or heal, and practical ways to start any healing program for your brain. Just a few of its practical topics: how to conquer depression, promote psychological growth, prevent psychological breakdown, and nurture the healing process. This is a pretty good non-clinical place to start, just understanding why we behave the way we do so that you can start understanding the people you're working with. Highly recommend this book. Another one, this is a little bit, or I'll get there in a minute. If you go to the Abide.network website, which is Adventist run, you can search addiction. There's lots of blog posts on there, things you can read through to get more knowledge and experience. But what's really cool about it is that there's a toolbox on there, and I use a lot of these tools in my life coaching work, where you can download all of them for free so that you can better help people. Things in there like how to establish empathy. There are other things like what's called find, argue, replace, where you find the lie, you learn to argue with yourself, you replace it with the truth. This is huge when working with people who have an addiction. And so I encourage you to find those resources. You can go on YouTube, look up motivational interviewing. This is basically the way that we work with people with behavior modification. And I would suggest that you find a Christian to do, to walk you through this, Because if you just type this in, you're just going to get behavior modification tools, which is good, but we want to remember that if we're using those, God has to be the one who is leading that and in it, right? We can't just modify behavior because that's all it will be, but you can at least learn techniques to help you while bringing in your own faith and relationship with God to be able to make it impactful. Does that make sense? Great. And then Mark Sandoval, he's great. Just look him up on YouTube. He's written The Law of Life. You can watch him or on Eugene Pine's page. This is a little bit heavier of a reading compared to the other book, but I think that I agree with most of this and that he does a great job at giving you an understanding of really how to work with people and just how to understand why we're struggling with the things that we do, and he's an Adventist. So I just wanted to give you those resources. Okay, let's start our section. Sorry, I'm just really hot. Is there a fan blowing? Or is it just the...
Open the windows, but yeah, the fan just blows the heat.
Oh, all right, I don't want to make people cold. I'll suffer. If you guys get cold, just shut the window. Okay, so working with people who struggle with addiction. I love what an author, there's an author I like, her name is Ellen, and something that she writes is that to deal with minds is the nicest work in which men ever engaged. And boy, that's just a beautiful quote to me, because what it says is that working with, there's no better place to be than working with people, right? There's no greater art form than the form of working with people. And so when we know that we're working with people, we want to make sure that we're picking words that are good. So we don't want to say, just the addicts that we're working with, because that's labeling an identity. We want to be talking about behavior, right? Especially if it's face-to-face with them. They're a person who has an addiction, not an addict, right? We want to give the right identity to it. We're speaking about behavior. We're not speaking about their identity, right? Does that make sense? Great, very good. Trying to see, I think only a couple people in this room have seen me do this before. So this is called the turtle in the briar patch. So it's a turtle in a briar patch, and the worst part, he doesn't have a shell. So what's the solution? Just stay there. What's the solution? Let's put our critical thinking hats on. I don't care what you say, but what's the solution here for the turtle who doesn't have a shell? You got to get out of there. Yeah, that's the answer. Usually people say, well, just get him a shell, right? But no, the solution actually is the turtle's got to get out of the briar patch, right? And so I always say that the problem isn't the problem, meaning that the thing we think is the problem really isn't the primary issue that propels us into harmful behaviors. And so instead of putting a shell on so that the briars can't hurt us, we need to get out of the briar patch altogether. Addiction is the symptom of not getting our needs met, right? Addiction is having legitimate needs and we try to meet it in illegitimate ways. Maybe someone is stressed all the time, high anxiety, panic attacks, so they drink or eat unhealthy food every night to cope. So we don't need to give them better food choices to break their addiction, right? We're not trying to keep them in the briar patch. We need to teach them the boundaries that Jesus gave us so that they can get out of the briar patch, right? So we're not just always trying to resolve the thing that we see, we're trying to resolve a little bit more deeply, right? Just like God does with us. And so ultimately when we're working with people, we are bringing we're bringing them out. So the next section, I should say, that we're going into, it might feel a little bit challenging. Is it okay if we go somewhere that might feel a little bit personally challenging? Do I have your permission to give you an alternative perspective to think about? Okay, good. Well, thank you. So the reason why it might feel a little challenging is we're going to have to be honest with ourselves, and we might feel the temptation of condemning ourselves, maybe for not acting a certain way that we want to be. But I just want to let you know that if that pops into your brain while we're here in this room, that's coming from the enemy, right? So don't give into that. We get to remember the truth of things is that God is growing all of us, right? But when we're working with people, we first must confront what is in here, right? Because there's a saying, have you guys heard hurt people before?
No.
Yeah, so sometimes people will say, oh, well, if you're a hurt person, then you'll go out and you'll hurt people. But what I'd like to submit to you is that people who have had healing will go out and heal people, right? People who have Jesus. And so, sure, hurt people, but healed people, heal people, right? So let's take a look at it together and let's walk through this together. So if we're thinking about making a program for our church or an event or working with people who have an addiction, we got to know what the qualities and skills are, and we have to ask ourselves, is this ministry, is it right for me? Is it right for me right now, right? So some of those things that I think are necessary as a person who has worked with people who have addiction, I think the biggest thing and the priority is that you need to have a healthy relationship with God. And what that looks like is an active Christian identity, belief, practice, and local community church or church that you are connected with on a consistent basis. And so that practice, that belief and practice looks like you hear God and he speaks to you, right? And so we all have days where we aren't maybe feeling so hot in this area. But what we are measuring by is the consistent experience that we're having, not those 1 or 2 off days or that off week, that we had, right, where we don't feel so close and we feel bogged down and maybe we need a friend to help us by praying with us and lifting us up. We're always going to need community, right? But we need to have that steady, stable relationship with God. I think that some necessary qualities is that you know how to establish and practice basic boundaries. And this might be an area that you've struggled with, and it's something that can get learned. I didn't bring the book with me, but there is a book called Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend, and they're Christian authors, and I think they just walk through it perfectly. So if that's something where you need to learn more, that might be a good place to start. And they give lots of biblical examples, which I appreciate. So having and establishing boundaries is important. It will come up all the time in addiction work. You'll want basic communication skills, what I like to call attending behavior. So that means that if I'm talking to Veronica, I'm going to be looking her in the eye when I'm talking to her, right? I'm not going to come up to my friend and Micah and just go like this as I'm talking to her and have a sour face on. I'm exaggerating, but I'm going to be open and friendly and conversational, right? And so just the basic things that you would do to carry on a conversation as if the person you're talking to is a close friend, right? And so that's all we really need to think of. Watching tone, making sure we're not sounding judgmental or angry or rolling our eyes. We don't want to be doing those things. It sounds like common sense, but boy, how often do we do it in our closest relationships? It's funny the faces I see when I said that with the, yeah, I do that. Right, so God's working on all of us. These are just basic things that we want. Empathy. Empathy, you need to be empathetic. So that's saying, like, I'm with you in it. Not just I see you in the struggle, that's sympathy, and that's a good thing and it has its place, but we need it to be I'm with you in it, right? That someone said the other day, that you hop into their moccasins and you walk a mile. And so it's trying to imagine that situation, or maybe you can relate to the situation because you've been through the same thing. In addiction work, this is going to come up all the time because people who are severely addicted feel so broken, and they just need to know you love them. They just need to know you hear them and that they're seen. And if you can't enter into empathy, it's going to be really hard to help them in that way, to really win that trust and to do that soul winning work, to be that channel that God is asking you to be. We'll talk about empathy a little bit later too. So what I would say that's not up here is, how many of you have ever struggled with a critical spirit before? I think all of us in some, and I put myself in that too. There have definitely been times that I have felt critical, right? But when we're working with people in addiction, I'll tell you that if this is a big, big area of struggle for you, this is something to bring right to the altar with Jesus, to have him transform in you, because I'm just going to speak from personal experience that it is going to be very challenging for you to work with a person in addiction because what we're dealing with is they might relapse and you feel like you've put in maybe so much hard work, or you feel like it's your work and not Jesus living through you, and so you become critical and you're like, well, they relapsed here and don't they know better? And so if you struggle with that critical spirit, bring that to the altar. It's going to be the thing that gets in your way. If I can just speak bluntly, if that's okay. the good thing is that God can help us with that. It's just good that we know what we're getting ourselves into, right? A couple more things. Emotional stability and maturity. I think that there is an extent that we need when we're working with individuals. We're all broken in some capacity, but I think that when we're in severe addiction, we're working with a different kind of brokenness. It's different from what I've seen, right? And so we want to say, we want to ask ourselves, am I an emotionally stable person? And so we would ask ourselves, in order to know that, do I have self-control in managing my own emotions and thoughts that come up, right? Am I bringing it to God? Am I staying and throwing myself a pity party every day? Where am I at with that, right? So it's a self-reflection question. None of you got to tell me where you're at, right? We might ask ourselves, can you handle not making other people's problems your problem? Do other people's baggage trigger you so that you project onto them or insert opinions that aren't helpful? Can you be calm even when someone else is in pain and might raise their voice at you? And so these are all things that we want to consider of, do we have emotional stability? And again, this is all stuff God will help us with. Number 2, safe people create safe spaces. Are you a safe person? Well, we'd all love to say yes to this. But you need the ability to create a safe space where people feel like they can be vulnerable and not shamed as discussion and disclosures happen. People are going to tell you really hard things that you can't even imagine. And maybe you've worked with somebody who they've disclosed something to you that is just so absolutely awful that they've been through that it's almost like you have to walk away from the conversation because it's so heavy. So there are sometimes people where we have to deal with really severe situations. I think for the most part, the things that come to us in our churches from the community, while there are severe things like that happen, I find that that's the outlier, although there are still, really hard things that we have to work with where people have been through very hard things, right? And so we need to be safe in that way, where they know that they're accepted, where they know that they're not in a judged zone, because as soon as they step in, they feel judgment for you, what do you think they're doing? What are they going to do? They're out, right? They're going to turn around, they're going to leave, they're going to say, this is no different than where else I've been. And so we should give reason why it's different when Jesus lives in us, right? Another thing is non-reactivity. And this is one we have to practice, where somebody might tell you something that has big shock value. And what's good for us to do is to maybe not react physically to that, right? So if somebody discloses something very shocking to me, I might say, oh, okay, thank you for sharing that with me, right? I'm not saying, gee, wow, sounds like you've been through a lot, or, there's no reactivity. Because sometimes people who have an addiction, they're going to see how far they can go until you leave. And so they're going to push and push and push, and when you start reacting in a way that is judging, or if you're reacting in a way that is unkind, they're out. And so the more they push you, the more just treat it like normal conversation, like somebody told you they went to the grocery store. Oh, okay. And maybe ask a follow-up question. How long has it been that way for you? Or something that shows them I'm interested and I'm not scared away from you, right? Discernment and knowing how to facilitate. So, for example, if we're leading a recovery program regarding sex addiction and we ourselves are a woman, you should be leading a group for women. If you're working with sex addiction and you're a man, you should be leading a group of men. It should not be vice versa. And part of that is because there are certain struggles that we as women, we can have a little bit of empathy for, but we cannot enter fully into, okay? And in some ways, it just isn't appropriate. And so, especially as lay leaders, right? So we also want to think, what's the age range of this? If I'm leading out in a sex addiction recovery, should I have minors present? What do you think? Absolutely not, right? We definitely don't want that. Now, if we're a youth leader in our church and we want to go back to our local church and say, oh, I would love to do some kind of addiction recovery for my teens, right? Relationship addiction recovery or whatever it is. We need to be saying, is my program age appropriate? Am I mixing the genders? Likely you shouldn't do that, right? And so this is the discernment that you need to be asking from God of like, okay, when I put on this program, is this making sense so that we're helping people appropriately, right? Have all of your leaders with your youth, have they all had background checks, right? So it's just thinking of these things that we need to be if we're doing addiction recovery. So, and we want to know how to facilitate, right? How to move discussion. We don't need to be the primary speaker or the one who is just like doing it all, but especially if we're doing like a group, and I'll talk to you about what options we have for our churches. But if you're facilitating like a 4 to 12 person group, then you need to know how to keep that flow going within the room, right? So that way, not 1 or 2 people dominate. And you may have to be comfortable saying, you know, if Sydney is talking a lot, I might say, Sydney, thank you so much for sharing, and we're gonna, you know, move on. And so there are certain things with facilitation that you can do kindly, but that you have to just know that are okay to do, right? And there's lots of, I think, books you could probably read on how to be a good facilitator, right? Ooh. Okay, hypnosis for addiction recovery. I want to hit on this because it's commonly used with addiction patients, especially when it comes to smoking. So I'm going to pose it to you, and I know we're a quiet bunch in here. Should we use hypnosis? Why? Say again, in here. Okay, but in counseling we help lead another mind, right? How is it inappropriately? You're on the right track. It's satanic. Yeah, and we're going to hit it in a minute. And I like to ask follow-up questions because we should know exactly why we believe what we believe, right? And then I heard you said something. What was it?
It's opening you up to other things.
Like what?
Other spirits.
Other spirits, right? Which is like what you were saying, right? It's satanic because it's opening our mind to other spirits. What else? What about physiologically? Or give me some more reasons. Why should we not use it? Because we can say it's satanic, but we want to know what is so satanic about it, right? Because if we're and the reason I'm posing this, go ahead.
You're not having that free will, and the Lord wants us to have free will. With hypnosis, it's somebody's willing you to do something.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And so the reason why I bring it up is because when we're working with people with addiction, you might not be working with Adventists. You might not be working with Christians. And the world, they're okay with hypnosis, right? Because what it does is when you have a smoker or a person who smokes, when they go in to the hypnosis session, they're getting relief for whatever symptom it is. But it takes their brain right offline. There's no free will, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. So each time that, and you're all right, by the way, I just like to challenge you because people will challenge you when you're working with them. So it's better it happens here than when you're there. So each time we resist a harmful craving or make a decision that aligns with our healthy goals or increase the length of time since our last addictive behavior use, our prefrontal cortex, one of the primary places in our brains where we reason and make decisions, it becomes stronger. So the automatic urges become weaker and weaker, allowing for our cognitive processes and thinking to promote our self-control. And this is how God is working with our brains. This is how he designed the brain to really kind of heal from addiction, right? And so those cravings, they reduce in intensity. So those old pathways in our brain, they start getting pushed out. God starts bringing the higher powers of our brain. We start being more surrendered to the Holy Spirit. And those lower passions, the things that are not good, it's less controlling. However, if hypnosis, if that's something that we are using, it does exactly what you said. It takes our brain offline. So it bypasses the entire process of our prefrontal cortex where we're able to make moral decisions, and we are not able anymore to strengthen that. So if we can't strengthen that, and let's just hypothetically say there comes a time down the road where you got to stand for something, have you strengthened your prefrontal cortex? Not if you've partaken in hypnosis, right? And so it's going to be harder for you to stand during those times. But if you have not done hypnosis, or if God has worked, if you've had hypnosis and God has worked with you after that to help in the areas that you've struggled, then you are going to be strengthening the power of your will, right? And so hypnosis is dangerous because it bypasses the natural process God gave us when he said the choice is yours. We have to exercise choice. We go to the gym, We work out, we do our bicep curls, and what happens? Hopefully we get swelled, right? We grow, our muscles grow. When we exercise faith, when we exercise strengthening the power of the will, those things grow. Does that make sense? Ellen says it like this. Men and women are not to study the science of how to take captive the minds of those who associate with them. This is the science that Satan teaches. We are to resist everything of the kind. We're not to tamper with mesmerism or hypnotism, the science of the one who lost his first estate and was cast out of the heavenly courts. This science may appear to you to be very valuable, but to you and to others, it's a fallacy prepared by Satan. It's the charm of the serpent which stings to spiritual death. It covers much that seems wonderful, but it's foreign to the nature and spirit of Christ. This science does not lead to him who is life and salvation. And I love this next part here. I wish to speak plainly to you. You have entered upon, and she's writing to a physician who was practicing hypnotism. That's the context of this letter. I wish to speak plainly to you. You have entered upon a work which has no place in the work of a Christian physician and which must find no place in our health institutions. So, how much of a place? No place, none, zero. Innocent though it may appear, this mind cure, if exercised upon the patients, will in its development be for their destruction, not their restoration. 2 Timothy 3 describes persons who accept error, such as one mind exercising complete control over another mind. God forbids any such thing. Reminds me of Deuteronomy 18, right, where he's walking through no necromancy, no speaking to the dead. We should just say no mind control. The mind cure, mesmerism, is one of Satan's greatest sciences, and it's important that our physicians see clearly the real character of this science. For through it, great temptations will come to them. We open our minds to more spirits, like you said. And like you said. This science must not be allowed a particle of standing room in our sanitariums. That's heavy, right? So it's something that we need to know as we're working with people with addiction. Do you know if our seminar is going to be 15 minutes more?
They're moving lunch to 12:30.
Okay. Very good. Perfect. So victory over addiction. Let me pose this question to you, and you probably know by now. You can just say it out, and I might ask you a question, but I just love hearing from you, so don't be shy. Why do you think it's important for someone to have had victory over an addiction area before they themselves lead out a group over that addiction area? What do you think? Or maybe you don't think that.
Just understand.
Go ahead.
Because of what was said before, that God healed people.
Wow, yeah. That's good. What were you going to say? Same thing?
Well, not exactly, that was better.
Oh.
I was just going to say that you have understanding and actual experience. And
Yeah.
I think people that may be struggling with addiction, healed people.
Yeah. You can enter into it a little bit more deeply, right? Mm-hmm.
Can't give something you don't have.
You can't give something you don't have, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
You go, go ahead.
and I was going to say too, I think it's encouraging from somebody who has overcome an addiction due to the glory of God, absolutely. But as an addict, seeing that somebody is able to overcome this, because sometimes there's no hope
Wow.
when you're in that position.
Yeah, sometimes there's no hope, and so when someone can see, oh, Veronica's overcome this, it's possible for me too, right? What were you going to say?
It's along the same lines.
Yeah.
But even going back to what Brother Stephen, I think, right? What he was
Yeah.
saying about going through to that little museum, like having gone through it and experienced
Mhm.
and being able to come back and to speak to it because he went through it.
Right, yeah. It just allows a greater way to work with people. Now, that's not to say, if you want to work with people who have issues with smoking and with drinking, and let's say you've never maybe struggled with that yourself, you can still work with people who have a different addiction. And the reason why we can is because we have felt the lowest low too in a different area of our lives. And so we can have empathy for situations that we don't necessarily, we might not have necessarily been through. But obviously if we have been through it, it's probably just a greater heart, right, that falls out to somebody, right? So I would agree with all those things. I think that, we don't need to be perfect in every area of our life to work with people, We have, examples of the disciples learning and growing before leading. The prophet Samuel, he was dedicated at a young age, and he grew up, learning. And so he definitely had like a lot of experience behind him. So we can have, if you're like that, you can work with people. If you started as the disciples where you were the son of thunder, you can still work with people. We're just all learning in different ways. We're not bad, just different, right, in that sense. We do need to have firsthand experience of victory and not just the knowledge of victory. If we only have knowledge, we won't really be able to understand fully what a person's going through. That can be hard on the participants. They're going to be looking at you as an example. And if we're really struggling with a particular addiction, we probably shouldn't be leading a specific group over that, but we should be involved in some capacity, right? Like if you've had victory over workaholism, I'd love to see you lead a group over how you've had overcoming power over that, right? How God's worked with you and giving you that victory. And part of the reason why we don't want to be the leader of that group is, and I've seen this firsthand. I'm not saying this always happens, but I know it's a common thing that can happen. So if you're leading out a group and you have not had victory over an area and it's really plaguing you, it's difficult, and maybe you're having a hard time with it, is that will come out in your session. That's going to come out in the group that you establish, and you're likely going to create a place that is unsafe for people because now you're projecting your issues onto them. And we all in some capacity struggle with making our experience other people's experiences. But I think that as a leader, we really have to keep that in check because we're facilitating. We're there for them. We're not there to put all our stuff on them. It's a recovery group, not recovery for Jackie group, and now I'm just putting all my stuff on people, right? Does that make sense? Okay. Very good. Yeah. So, I should mention this. What will likely happen if that first one doesn't happen, where we just project everything onto people? Sometimes we will just feel like a hypocrite, and we'll just disband the group altogether, and that it's not beneficial for everybody. You're leaving feeling condemned and shamed and like, I can never do that again. And now Satan's got you wrapped around his finger because you've believed the lie that you're no good and that you've messed up. But that's not the truth, right? We're always redeemable as long as we are yoking up with Jesus. So, and again, I'm doing a very brief overview of, what is addiction? Is it for you? Do you possess the qualities? If you don't, what qualities might be good to possess? And so now we're going to go into addiction programs and seminars. And remember, we don't start groups and programs so that we can help our own needs. Just like we don't become counselors and therapists to help ourselves and figure out our own problems. That's not a good primary motivation. We focus on proclaiming liberty to those in captivity around us. That's not to say that we won't get something out of leading the groups or maybe get help with an issue that comes up, but it can't be our primary motivation, because if it is, it's no longer disinterested benevolence. It's no longer my sight is focused on your need. It's my sight is focused on me, and now I'm going to miss all the needs that you have, that if I did see them, maybe God could have worked more powerfully through that situation. So I'm going to give you now ideas you can bring back to your local church depending on what you want to do and maybe where you want to start. And so what we can look at is, here's a couple of different things. You might do a smoking or alcohol cessation talk, so stopping to smoke, stopping drinking, for people to gain tools. You might follow it up with ongoing support, like a 12-step group, or you might go on to, if you're from Maine, there's a website called 211 Maine. You can just type it into Google, and it gives you a whole list of all the programs, mental health and otherwise, that are in your local community. And so if you feel like, our church isn't quite equipped right now to have a full 12-step program, but we could have a talk about it and then give resources for somebody, maybe you do that. You might have a food addiction talk. Maybe you have a talk about giving people small lifestyle changes they can do to help with their problem, right? So maybe you do an exercise seminar focused on addiction. Maybe you do a sunlight seminar focused on addiction. Maybe you have a health expo that as they go through all the different stages, maybe you focus that completely on addictions. There's lots of things that you can do. Here's some more things. This first one I really like. Has anyone been through this? anyone seen this book before? 13 Weeks to Peace. It's by Jennifer Jill Schwarzer. I've led out this group. This is a life recovery group. It goes for 13 weeks, just like the name says. And you meet once a week on, let's say, Thursday or whatever day you pick. So you meet once a week. And the book work itself is 13 weeks. I always say it's 15 weeks, though, because first you're going to do an introductory meeting where you're going to go over how the group works, any rules of the group that you might have, any social rules that you might have. And on week 15, after you do the book work, you'll have a little bit of a graduation ceremony with everybody where it's just good fellowship together. And I guess you don't have to do that, but I find that after 13 weeks of diving into the hardest stuff that you're all talking about together, you're probably going to want to have that. And how I like to, when I conduct this, I always make sure that during the duration of the 13 weeks, that in my group, people have prayer partners, and we're just allowing Holy Spirit to move and work in people's lives. And so when they bring up issues that they're going through, I've certainly given tools and help for people, but most of the time when we're right there in the group, I say, let's just pray into that right now, as it comes up. And I'll tell you what, the last group I led, I was very hands-off, and God was very hands-on. And the stories that I've heard from people who came through that group had these amazing breakthroughs, not because of anything that I did. They were just so open, they were so receptive to God, His Holy Spirit, that they saw real change in their lives, real transformation, not just behavior modification. So this book, and I'm going to leave these out on the table out back, and you can look at them anytime for the duration of this weekend. Please don't take them, I need them. But 13 Weeks to Peace, for example, it's going to walk you through reading and book work. And at every end of the chapter, there's like 5 to 10 questions where you as a group can discuss them, and where people, before they meet, you journal out what your thoughts are about the question. And why I love this book too is because in the back, you have this huge toolbox. All these pages are your toolbox, and it teaches you all the different real tools in Christ that you need. So the 8 doctors, it teaches you about the 8 natural health laws. It teaches you about forgiveness, and there's charts in here where people can journal and so that they can get through bitterness. There are how to establish empathy, how to go through anger and overcome all these different things, and it's real practical tools in the back. And so if you're a beginner and you think that it could be really scary to lead out an addiction program or group, but you want to do some small group, I think you should start here. And if you go onto the Abide Counseling Network, I think that she has paid trainings that you can do that go over this and addiction and anxiety and depression relief. That way you can be trained to do this. You don't need to be. Just if you do lead out this group, you need to go through the book yourself first, fully and slowly. But this is a great resource. My biggest group I had was, I think it was 12, it may have been 13 people, and that was the edge of my, that was the extent of what I was comfortable with. I think that this group is best designed between maybe 6 to 9 people, so you can have a bigger group. If you want to have 4 people, go for it. But I find this is one of the bigger small groups that you can do. I will say that I did a co-ed group the last time that I ran it, because the things that come up, it's often appropriate to do both men and women in this kind of group. So if you're looking to do church co-ed kind of group, this is probably the one where you can do that. If you're more comfortable just having women, if you're more comfortable just having men, whatever gender you are, feel free to lead out that group. But it seemed to work well when we did it. It's $20 per book, $55 per bundle. Everyone should buy their own book if you do it.
How much are in the bundle?
Sorry, good question. The bundle is a bundle of 3 books called 13 Weeks to Peace, 13 Weeks to Love, and 13 Weeks to Joy. And these are all separate programs you can lead out, and that is a bundle. But it'll be $20 per book that you decide. Yeah, good question.
And could you just go back to the last?
Sure.
Thank you.
Perfect. And I can show you this later, and I can email this to any of you too. Here's the next one. I'm not going to take it out of its box right now. You'll see it on the table. It's an Adventist 12-step group. It's called Journey to Wholeness. I've been a participant in this group. It's really incredible. Now, this is an intermediate level because you are going to be going into deeper things life-wise. So you might go into, someone might have a sex addiction. Somebody might have severe binging issues or possible, there's bigger things that are come up than in 13 Weeks to Peace, where it's designed for God to start giving you peace in the areas that you struggle, right? This is real, like, you kind of get into the nitty-gritty here. Whereas in 13 Weeks to Peace, people can decide how much they want to share, but it often is more surface than it is very, very deep. Are any of you familiar with just the regular 12-step program in the world? Basically, you're working through 12 steps. I'll read them to you. Read them to you really quickly. Step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our compulsions, obsessions, and addictions, and we acknowledged that our lives have become unmanageable. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And for us, as we teach the group, it's Jesus, right? It's God. We, at Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to other human beings the exact nature of our wrongs. And it just goes on from there. This is a pretty long group. Some people keep it ongoing for accountability check-ins, but really I think it ends up taking 6 to 8 weeks if you're consistent. So that's a good mid-range one. I think it's intermediate because of the nature of things that come up. Journey to Wholeness, I'm going to read, it says, this is a support system for people of any faith or lack thereof who are struggling with things that are hurting them or the people they love. And it's for anyone who finds him or herself in the grip of unhealthy dependence upon substances or other destructive behaviors. Journey to Wholeness assists participants in addressing an unlimited number of problems, traveling as individuals who are committed to health, healing, sanity, and serenity, and is built around small group interaction and deals with the power of the will. In this kit is also like a USB drive of all of the different content you would go over. There's this book here. It's literally just the facilitator's guide. It tells you everything you need to know about marketing a program, having the program, what you do at each step. Like it holds your hand so that you can do this successfully. It tells you everything that you might need, and you can look at that more.
That's $70.
And this one's $70. Yep. I think you can find this one on adventsource.com. 13 Weeks you can find on Amazon or on the Abide website. This is basically the same thing, Celebrating Life and Recovery by Cherie Peters, but it's more expensive. It's $250. And this is a group where you want no more than 4 people because we're diving deep with this one, right? The other one is going to be very similar. I find in Cherie Peters' program that just greater stuff comes up. And so if you're a beginner, do not start here. But if you have led a group or two, I would do this one. So it's a biblically based, she's an Adventist, it's a biblically based 14-week program to help people escape the crisis of anxiety, anger, abuse, addiction, depression, divorce, eating disorders, self-mutilation, sex addiction, workaholism, perfectionism, and other challenges. And on this journey, participants will be a part of a supportive group who will open up to each other and to God, allowing the Holy Spirit to lead them into healing. And she does like different videos you will watch each week. You have a workbook that you go through. She equips you with everything that you might need. It's a really powerful program if you can do it. How much time do we have left here?
It's 11:48.
So I have 10 more minutes, and then you, 20,
10 more minutes
and then you can?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys started a little late, so.
I know, I'm all thrown off with time. My brain doesn't do numbers very well. What might you encounter? So I should say, so is this making sense? So we looked at already, what is addiction? Do you possess the qualities, probably that are necessary for it? Options that you might bring back to your local church that you can do, And now I just want to talk about what might you encounter when you do one of these programs, specifically working in small groups. And the reason why I give you so many small group options is because addiction ministry, maybe I'm biased in saying this, but I just really feel like this is the truth, is that it is a different kind of ministry. It's a different kind of work where a lot of things sometimes we can just put on a program or seminar and teach people like valuable skills and they can take it back and, you know, God helps them to incorporate it into their life. With addiction, like you're in it for the long haul usually. And so when you are in an extended process, you're going to be building important relationships. And so, you know, if you're with somebody doing a 13-week program, talking, or a 6 to 9 week program, talking about, you know, the intense things that you struggle with that you've never told anybody else, you know, it's going to be important that you're going for a long time because you're developing that relationship, right? And so having a small group not only makes it so that 1 or 2 people are holding up the group, but so that everybody together can be a family. God designed us for community and for Him, right? And so when we have the love of community and the love of God, we're able to heal. So what might you encounter? Or let me ask you, what are some things you're scared you might encounter?
Anger.
Like from somebody toward you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good one. Anger, yeah. What else? Anything else that you want to disclose to me that you're nervous might come up?
I feel like acknowledging your own flaws.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else?
Not having a good answer.
Oh, not having a good answer. Yes. I think that those are all very valid. Let's talk a little bit about a few of those. Tough emotions. So, will anger come up? It might not. You know, and so sometimes, you know, we think, oh, I'm going to be working with addiction and I'm working with the guy off the street who he's just an angry drunk, and, you know, maybe you're working with the guy who struggles with anger. But a lot of the time, from what I've seen, is when anger comes up, the person isn't angry at you. The person is feeling anger in their hearts because they're discontent with the struggle that is within them, and they've never really understood how to get it out. Right? And so it may not be that somebody raises their voice at you. They might feel a little bit like they're intense, right? But if somebody does raise their voice at you, what we get to do is be Jesus. We get to have Jesus live in us, and we get to say, you know, what I tell myself is calm people breathe. I like to say that in my head when I'm in intense situations, and I practice deep breathing in that moment. You don't need to respond to them right away, you know, and you can say something like, if we have eyes for other people, we get to say something like, you know, I know this isn't who you are right now, and what can I do for you right now? I'll tell you what, it de-escalates just like that. I wish I could teach you de-escalation today. I'm not going to be able to. If you email me, I can send you de-escalation techniques and tricks. That way, if that's a fear of yours or something that makes you nervous, I'll be happy to equip you in how to respond and how to be composed, right? But ultimately, it's going to be God who works in us a quiet and calm spirit. But there are other things we can do alongside Him. What might you encounter? The need for physical boundaries. One time a person walked into my church, and I was really excited that they were there. I could tell that they were probably from off the streets. I don't know if you were here yet when this happened. You might have been. Sydney and I go to the same church. And I could tell that they just, like, it would be great if they had a hug, I thought, at the time, you know, because they just seemed like they really needed, like, physical touch and human interaction. Sometimes I think we can just see when people need physical touch, you know, and I love physical touch. Any of you who know me know that. And so this was back when I didn't really consider what boundaries might be good. This was several years ago. You know, when I went up to them, I said, oh, hi, you know, welcome to our church. I went to go give them a hug, and they were way stronger than I thought. And they pulled me into an embrace and gave me a big wet kiss right on my head. You were not there for that, Sydney. You know, and so talk about shock value, right? And so, you know, I forget totally what I said to them, but I think it was a lot, because I was shocked, I don't remember, but I think it was something along the lines of, I give myself a little distance and pat them and say, so glad you're here, and I kind of walked away. So the need for boundaries is important. I'm not saying don't hug people. You should hug people. We want to be loving and lovable Christians. But we also want to have discernment that when we're working with people, maybe we start with a handshake and see what their cognitive ability is, because we want to create a safe space for us too, and a safe space for other people. Now, did the hug and kiss in the scheme of things, was it destructive? No, it was just a little awkward. And there are going to be things that come up that are awkward, and we're going to have to learn and grow. And I'm not saying all of you are going to be kissed by a homeless man. But I am saying is that sometimes we will just have to learn what we're okay with, what we're not, and we just ultimately have to learn how to work with people. And I doubt that, that's just something that happened to me, but, you will work through your own things that come up. So learn, if you don't know really how to establish boundaries now, learn how to do that, because it will be easier to de-escalate people, know how to interact with people, and know how to address a need appropriately. Sometimes people, when they're working with us, they, we'll get to this one in a minute, I'll tell you right now. Sometimes when you're the leader, people become codependent or they cling to you. And so what happens when that occurs is you want to help people toward what we call, and hear me rightly with this, because I know when I say this word, the Adventist Christian ears are going to perk up and say, what do you mean by that? We want to help people toward what we call in the counseling world towards self-sufficiency. And all that means is that they are no longer just relying on Sydney to do everything for them, but that you teach them, okay, if you need to go to the grocery store, that means that you don't ask Sydney to do it every single time, but here's how to enable you to complete the thing that you need to do. That's all I mean by self-sufficiency. Obviously, we have no self-sufficiency. We are dependent wholly on God, but we make choices and we enable people to follow through on their choices, right? So you might encounter codependent people, those who cling to you. And again, this goes back to having not maybe physical boundaries, but mental boundaries with people that, there might be somebody who, this occurred one time where a person was new in the church and obviously had been through some things, and they kept texting one of our elders over and over and over, straight throughout the day, sometimes at 4 a.m., sometimes, whatever. They would get really angry when they wouldn't reply. And so what you would do at those times, if that happens with that clinginess or that codependency, is you don't answer your phone. You say, I'm going to help people in between these hours. There's no reason why at 2 a.m. you need to be answering a question that can wait until the next morning. If it's an emergency, please go deal with the emergency. Most things are not emergencies, but people may try to guilt trip you. People may try to do anything they can because they don't have that love need yet from God. And so they're looking to you to meet the need. So you have to be careful in working with people that they don't see you as the person who's going to meet their need, but constantly bring them toward Jesus. And again, we can talk more about how you actually establish that and work with codependency. I don't think it's one that severely, you'll encounter, but you might feel here and there that, okay, this person's maybe a little bit more in my bubble than I would like. But working with people is good, but we need to have boundaries that help ourselves and help other people. You're probably going to encounter relapse. Expect it. Because people will make these huge leaps and bounds, and sometimes you don't know where it came from, and it's just like they're back at square one. But we know where it comes from. Satan will do everything he can to throw you off course. And what I like to remind people is that, you are not your relapse. That this is just a bump in the road, and we're going to keep moving forward together, and we're going to keep journeying on, and we're going to get through this too. And there's still hope for you even in this. I think when people hear that, they just need you to, they need to know that they're loved, especially in relapse where there's so much shame, right? Shame says I am wrong. And so if they feel like they at their core are wrong and bad and awful and they just want to hide away forever, well, the only thing that's going to overcome that is the power of God and of love. And if love is being awakened in us, then it's being awakened by God, and we're awakening it in other people. You might encounter people who don't really want to talk about God, and you're going to encounter people who are waiting for you to reject them. You don't need to put Jesus in every single word you say, because the way that you live your lifestyle should speak of Jesus wherever you go. And if you are able to put Jesus in there, by all means, please do. But you're going to be working with people who they're offended by that to start off. And so if they are, you're not going to win them by forcing it down their throat, right? But by your conduct, they're going to see Jesus in you, and one of two things will happen. They will radically transform and accept Jesus, or they will decide, that's really not for me, and they'll walk away, right? Because they're rejecting Jesus. It's never a rejection of you. But so we want to be sensitive if people don't want to talk about God. But we have our own lives and our choices. We can make it so that they know that something's different, that we too have walked with God. You might encounter people who are waiting for you to reject them. I just want to read this really quickly. In 2 Timothy, I love this verse. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. I guess we don't have longer than we thought. I'll watch. We'll find out. Don't worry. You'll get fed. 2 Timothy.
Lunch is 2 hours.
Oh, okay. Thank you. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 2. You've probably all heard this beginning. Preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. But I want to hit on the next part of it. And this is in the context of the brethren, but I think that we can kind of make this about anybody, but just know that that's the context. So it says, convince, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and teaching. So when we're working with people and we're convincing and rebuking and encouraging, we're to do it by two different means. What did it say? We convince, rebuke, exhort with what? Long-suffering and teaching or doctrine, right? Depending on your version. So, did the long-suffering come first or did it come after the teaching? It came first. It says to do so with all long-suffering and teaching. So listen, it's real good to teach. The Bible tells us that that's true. But when we're working with people, it's the long-suffering that comes first, right? And so having patience, bearing about our brothers' burdens, right? Bearing with them. Making sure that we're not just like, here's the quick fix for your addiction. Just stop. These things are not helpful. I think as Adventists, we like to say, here's the herb you need and it will fix all your woes. And I like that. I like that we should, I think we should be using herbal remedies. And I think that Jane was onto something the other day when she had that presentation. But it's God who's going to use those herbs to heal us. And it's not maybe the first thing we tell somebody, because when we're addressing emotional issues, again, we're not addressing the symptom. We're saying, God, let me into their hearts and let me help them. Let me journey with them where they're struggling so that root can be resolved and so that your love can meet their need. Does that make sense? So we have to be long-suffering with people, not short-suffering, not 2 days after and they still haven't responded to the love of God. Long-suffering, right? And we talked, you may encounter uncomfortable situations. I have not encountered, of my own stuff, I've not encountered an uncomfortable situation where I felt unsafe. I've only encountered things that made me felt, a little awkward, and then I learned from them. And so I would say, don't be afraid of awkwardness, because there are plenty of conversations we enter into with people where we don't know the right thing to say. We don't know the right response. And you know what my default is? When I don't have the right answer for somebody, if God doesn't give me something to say in that moment, or if I just can't pull from this knowledge base and say, well, in addiction treatment, this is what you would do first. I find that just defaulting to the love of God is the best thing that any of us can do. And just to be honest and say, I don't fully understand what that feels like, but I see you right now and I see you're in great pain and I just want to love you the best I can. And so I might not have all the answers for you, but I just covenant to do all I can for you, and that's within my ability. And I think that when we're able to just be real with people and we don't have all the answers and we just tell them that, I think that's good enough. Because God will just bring the rest. The less we focus on relying on ourselves and more on feeling our need for God and his wisdom, the more he's going to be able to speak to us and give it to us. And remember, we're all learning and growing. So I think sometimes you got to be in the situation where you don't have the answer for the Lord to teach you what you need to do.
I was just thinking you're saying that, that is just a perfect example to that person as well of a witness of humility.
Yeah.
Because you're truly humbling yourself, accepting that you don't know this.
Yeah, right. It's perfect. I'm glad that you said that. You know, and in my coaching work, there are situations that come up sometimes, and like you can ask any of the Day Spring staff. I have sweat sometimes dripping down my back after a session because I'm just like, Father, I do not know what to do right now. And this is from someone like, I've had schooling, I've had coaching, and listen, sometimes I still don't know. But I just know that my Father won't let me down. And I think that if you're in that space, there's just no better place to be. Let's talk logistics about how you make a program.
All right. We'll try to keep this brief so you guys don't starve on us and suffer. It's a long line anyway. Those kids will always be right up front. Hopefully my kids are serving again or something useful. Okay, so let's talk about how are you actually going to pull this off. And you guys have a handout, and the handout that we gave you covers for the vast majority what I'm going to kind of talk about from here on out. I'll give you a few extra details, but that's kind of the outline of what we are going to cover. So the very first thing that we need to do, if we are thinking about doing any program whatsoever, addiction or not, is we need to pray, right? We really need to seek the Lord's guidance on this, because ultimately this is not about us. This is not our program. This is God reaching his people and reaching his children, right? And so we really need to make sure that we are putting our personal...
I don't know what
I did something. There we go. Okay. So ultimately, we really need to put our preferences aside. We need to put our desires aside, and we need to listen for God's planning in events and programs like this. You might be really passionate about addiction recovery, right? But there might not be a need in your community, right? Or in your church. And we know that addiction is a big problem in our society, right? But that might not be the biggest problem in your area or your church. So you want to make sure that you are, as Jackie said, this is the perfect description of it, riding the wave, right? Not making a wave. So, and it might be that addiction is a problem. It's just not what needs to happen right now. There's a timing to it too. So, for example, I mentioned to you that I'm part of this, not necessarily because I have a ton of experience with addiction, right? But I'm passionate about it. And I had have you guys ever had like those downloads from God where like you're trying to go to bed and all of a sudden you're just inundated with all of these things, right? All of these ideas, all of these plans, all of, scripture, whatever it might be. That happened to me one night, and it was just like downloaded in my head, this whole plan to start with this addiction recovery seminar and how that would launch right into an evangelistic series that would launch right into, this Bible study, right? This whole year-long thing. And I said, okay, Lord, well, let's do it. But the one thing that I was impressed really strongly on was that it had to be the right speaker. That it needed to be a speaker that could not only talk from personal experience on addiction, but that could be very gospel-centered, and that was essential, especially if the step was going to be from this into an evangelistic series that needed to be rooted in the gospel. And so I started calling people and asking people if they could, help with this or that, and the doors just didn't open for the right speaker. And so I said, okay, that's fine. But one of the people, actually Josiah, had recommended that I call Dr. Mark Sandoval, because they were friends, from UT Pines. And so I called him. He's like, yeah, I'd love to come, but I'm booking out 2 years. I said, oh, well, I feel like this, I want to see if I can make this happen this year. So, I'll get back to you. And I realized, I was like, what am I doing? God, yes, he gave me this plan or this idea, right? But that doesn't mean that he needed it to be executed right now. Maybe he needs it executed in 2 years, and he wants this doctor to be the speaker, and so he knew he had to give me the idea now in order to book it for them, right? So we don't want to force things to happen. We want to move in step with God, and the only way that that is going to happen is if we are connected to God and we are praying and we are listening for his voice. bird just flew into that window. So, the next thing we have to ask ourselves is, what is the goal? What is our goal? With any program, what is ultimately our goal? To save souls. Yeah, to lead people to Jesus, right? We're not looking to make a world full of healthy sinners, right? We are looking to lead them to the source of true healing. And so we need to look at what our goal is within that context. And the way I see it is there's two options. Our goal can be evangelism, which would be like outreach. So if your goal is reaching other Christians, maybe they aren't within our denomination, but you are reaching other, you want to target other Christian groups. Maybe you want to target unchurched people, right? That is kind of what I think of as evangelism, right? You're reaching outside of our church. And then you have revival, because our churches are made up of a whole lot of broken people, right? And so there's certainly work to do within our churches. That would be within the context of revival. That would be inreach. And the way that you are going to advertise and target those different groups is going to make a big difference for the rest of the decisions you make down this chain. The next thing you need to do is you need to determine the needs of your group. So this is going back to, we want to ride the waves and not make the waves. And so we need to evaluate what are the actual needs, the actual felt needs of the groups that we are trying to reach. A great way to do that is through community needs surveys. I don't have a picture of one up here, but we can get you guys a copy of one if any of you are interested in what they look like. But basically little pieces of paper, you can go around door to door, you can get to go to different businesses and places in the community, and it just asks questions, do you think that any of these things would benefit our community? Addiction programs or depression programs or cooking classes or diabetes reversal or, things like that. And then there's a space for them to give their information so you can contact them again, or to maybe write in some other thoughts or needs that they feel. And there's a lot of different ways. You have a few different, you have a list here of different types of addictions that could be targeted for programming. The next thing you need to ask yourself is, what is the format going to be? Is it going to be a seminar, or is it going to be a small group? Jackie gave you a few options of small group programs. You can also do a seminar where you have a speaker up front and you're going over ways that you can equip people with tools to then work on their own. And the reason that this is important is because it's going to really dictate how you set up your program in terms of frequency and the different people that you need to help you to actually execute the program. You might also find that larger seminars are really good launching points into small groups. So you can cast a broad net for people, and then from that broad net, you might have a smaller group of people that actually want the follow-up, right? And the smaller group and, more intimate interactions. We do recommend, as Jackie mentioned, using a program, especially if you're new to this. Use a well-established program that will kind of walk you through things, and we have a number of options back there, and you have them listed on your handout as well. Next, you need to determine the frequency. When are you going to do it, and how long are you going to do it for? If you're doing a seminar, you're probably looking at either a single night or maybe a weekend-long seminar, maybe as long as a week-long seminar, right? If your speaker is local, you could do a series of seminars that's maybe once a week for a month or something like that, but it's usually a shorter duration. If you're going to go more into the small group setting, then that's going to be a longer duration. You're going to be talking about weekly for a couple of months. You're going to be talking about monthly for a period of time. The big thing with this is when you're scheduling those, you want to make sure that if you're going weekly or monthly, that you stay very consistent. So you want to choose the same day of the week. If it's a monthly program, you want it to be, the second Thursday of every month. So people don't have to worry about what date was it that I was supposed to be there again? No, it's just the second Thursday of the month, whatever the number is, right? And that's going to make it much easier for people to be consistent in terms of attending your programs. The next is location. So location, are you going to use the church? Are you going to use a public venue? Or are you going to do it in a home? And depending on what your format is going to dictate a little bit of what venue you choose. When we start talking about addiction, one of the things that's most important with location is that it's a place that people feel like they can attend discreetly, or at the very least, they feel very comfortable and safe in terms of being able to speak and be present. So that's really important to consider. You don't want to be holding it someplace, your group someplace, where you have foot traffic walking by and people can potentially just drop in and overhear things or plug themselves in. So it needs to be a place that is controlled relatively. Another consideration too with this is if you are targeting people that are unchurched, if you are targeting people that are atheists, they might be a lot less likely to attend a program in a church. So that's a consideration too that you want to be aware of. Next, you need to assemble your team. For a seminar, you need a speaker, but for a small group, you really are going to need a facilitator or multiple facilitators. So you might need people that are equipped to lead that group. You might need more than one of them, depending on how big of a program you're doing. So keep that in mind. Other roles you need to fill is you need somebody that's going to be the lead organizer, and I highly recommend that whoever that person is, it's not the same person that is speaking or facilitating, because they're going to have other responsibilities the day of the program. They will not be able to fulfill if they're on stage speaking. If it's a seminar, even with the facilitator, even with small groups, if it's a very small group, you might be able to get away with having the facilitator and the person primarily organizing it. But if you're talking about a bigger, where you have multiple groups going, you really should have facilitators separate than the person that's really in charge of organizing everything. Yeah. If you are getting into larger programs, larger seminars, larger programs with multiple small groups going simultaneously, you really should have an organizing team, because you're going to have considerations like flyers and advertising and AV that you're going to need to consider. And so to have a team to take on all those responsibilities is going to be much easier than having one person having to kind of take on that whole load. And then the other thing that you need to consider too is, are you going to need any day of volunteers? Are you going to need greeters? Are you going to do any health screenings as a free thing for the community, where you're going to need people there to take care of that? Are you going to be serving any food, where you're going to need somebody that can do the serving? Are you going to need mics and projectors and those things, where you need a Kyle to run AV for you? Those are all things you need to take into consideration ahead of time. Next, you got to choose a title. And we're kind of getting more into the advertising here. Really important to choose a title that is really going to capture a few things. First of all, it's going to create some sort of intrigue, right? You want a title that will draw people in, and you want a title that's going to give them an idea of what they are going to get from attending your seminar. Not just what are you going to do, but what are they going to get. And so that really, you want to choose words or titles that kind of reflect some sort of transformation, right? So using buzzwords or victory words, right? Especially when we're talking about addiction, is going to be much more capturing to people. Puns work really well too, and alliterations. So those can be helpful. Next, if you're concerned that you're not going to get very much interest, people love free things. So if you want to entice them to attend, you can advertise some freebies, free books. You can do gift cards. You can do different free health screenings and those kinds of things. The trick with these is, first of all, you want to make sure you advertise them well. But you also want to have them tied in with them giving you their contact info. So then you have a way to connect with them again. So it's not just put your name in the hat and we'll pull a name out. It's put your name and your email, or your name and your phone number, or your name and your mailing address, so that you have a way to get in touch with them again. Almost done here. Last two. Trying to be sensitive to everyone being hungry. Next, designing a flyer. So this is really important, I think, in terms of getting people interested in attending your event, is that you have the ability to design a flyer that looks professional and is going to capture attention and interest. And so as far as flyers go, I highly recommend that you use templates, design templates. I don't know about any of you guys, not a graphic designer, can't take a blank paper and like create some sort of nice, beautiful flyer off of it. I don't have that kind of vision. But what I can do is I can scroll through templates and I can say, that one, I can make that one work for what I need. That has, a good spot for a picture, or the number of pictures I need, and space for writing and all of that. There's a lot of different free programs that you can use. There's Canva, Poster My Wall, Adobe Express. There's a number of other ones too. I personally really like Canva. As far as pictures go, pictures can be really helpful. Stock photos work really well because they just add a lot of professionalism to your flyer. If you have really good personalized photos, that's wonderful too, but make sure they're really high quality so they don't get blurry when you blow them up into a poster. When you're using photos that are not, and when you're using photos in general, you need to be really aware of copyright laws. And so you just want to make sure that you are getting them from a stock photo website, whether there's royalty-free ones and things like that too. So you want to make sure that you utilize those resources so you don't have any issues. And you really want to try to keep the wording minimal on the flyer. People aren't going to stand there for a long period of time reading your flyer. They're going to look at the big bolded parts and decide whether or not they're interested in reading the details or getting more information. So keep it narrowed down to the title, the speaker, the date, the location, the freebies. This is a good one to advertise there. And then maybe if you have space, a little one-liner of what the program is and what they'll get from it. And then give them a way to get more information, whether that's an email or a phone number. QR codes are the newest thing. I just got a QR code reader. I've never used one before, but I guess that's helpful. But those are all, that's about as much as you would want to put on the flyer. And then you're going to start advertising. So when are you going to start advertising? For generally speaking, 2 to 4 weeks ahead is kind of the sweet spot. If you go too far in advance, people are going to forget. And if you go too close to the event, people are going to have other things to do already. Sometimes with bigger events like the Nedley Depression Recovery Program or some other bigger, kind of bigger commitment things, a little bit more time can be helpful so people can plan. But generally that 2 to 4 weeks is the sweet spot. Personal invitation is the best way to advertise. Okay, so as much as you can, personally invite people to your events. But there's lots of other ways that you can get the word out there to reach the people that maybe you don't know already. You can use community boards. Community resource centers usually have places to hang things. Grocery stores usually have bulletin boards. Social media is a huge way to get information out there. You can boost social media ads for like a few dollars and reach a ton of people. Email, if you have access to email, you can also use local newspapers and radios depending on the demographics that you're trying to reach. And then you have all of your church locations. So you have your church bulletins, you can hang things up in your churches. The conference has the connect emails that go out every week. So if you want to get the word out to the conference in general about a program you're running, you can send your information to Dustin Johnson, who's the communications secretary or whatever, director at the conference, and his email is on your handout. And then if you want to get it out directly to health ministries, you can get your information to Jackie, and she will send everything out through health ministries to all of our health ministry leaders and bulletin secretaries and pastors and that kind of thing to kind of get that out within the churches. And then the last thing that we need to do, once we do all of that, is we have to keep praying, right? So the program is only going to be successful if the Lord is leading it. And it's really important that we pray from the beginning all the way through all the stages of executing the program. We need the Lord's help if our program is going to be successful in reaching souls. And we might even be able to present the information, but the Holy Spirit is the one that brings the conviction, right? So we can't change people's hearts. We can't make them choose anything. We can present it, and the Holy Spirit can convict them. And that's really where the transformation happens. And that's only going to happen if we keep praying through everything for everyone that's involved too. So I know we're running late, and I know everyone's hungry, so we won't take up any of more of your time. But if anybody has questions, you can hang out here. Jackie and I will be here for another couple of minutes, and we're happy to answer questions. But let's close in prayer, so if people want to get to lunch, they can head out. Heavenly Father, Lord, we are so grateful for the way that you care for all of your children, the way that you are constantly reaching your hand down to the depths of darkness here on this earth to reach your lost children. And so, Lord, we just pray that you would prepare us to be channels, Lord, for you to work through, to reach down here and to pull those captives out, that you would use us as mouthpieces to proclaim liberty to them, Lord, that they would know that they can have victory through you, complete and total victory and transformation, Lord. Please help us to experience this in our own lives so that we might have something to share with those around us. Bless us, I pray, as we go on from here, that we might be able to continue to learn more and more ways, Lord, that we can be vessels for you and channels for you to work here on this earth. We thank you, Lord, and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen.